Hi, this is DarkFox127 and welcome to another Skyrim Creation Kit tutorial video. Apologies for it being a while since I've done a tutorial video. I've tried to sort of do one or two different things on the channel and I was sort of running out of material a little. But I've got a few ideas now, keep us going with a few tutorials. So today we're going to be doing, as the title suggests, Enchanted Arrows. A while back I created a mod for Enchanted Arrows after I spent a few hours sort of messing around with the kit trying to figure out how to actually do it, if it was even at all possible, given that they weren't in the game at all. And after sort of long few hours I finally figured it out. It's not actually that difficult, and I've had a few people requesting in the past about how to do it. So now my mod's sort of out there, everyone's enjoyed it, it's something that people like. I'm going to give you the sort of tools, the means, hints, tips and tricks on how to make your own. So to begin, you want to do usual, open your Skyrim update ESM, set as active on the file that you're modding currently, if you are. We all should know that by now. So we're going to want to do about 4 or 5 stages with this. There's sort of a string of things that we need to do. So the way we're going to do it, we're actually not going to work from creating the arrow first, we're going to go backwards. So we want to go right the way down to the enchantment that we're going to want to put on it. So that's going to lead to the effect that we're going to need. So if we're making a spell, we'd go from magic effect into a... oh, it's been a while. Into a spell and then into a book. This is going to be a similar kind of process. So we want to go under magic and magic effects. Now what I'm going to do, because it's a nice arrow to sort of show it working well, is a paralysis arrow. So I'm going to type in the filter under magic effect, para. If you know how to mess with magic effects and how to create one from scratch, then you're going to be alright. You can probably go and do that, but the easiest thing to do if you've got something that you want to apply to an arrow is just to find that effect in the magic effects and make a few tweaks. In this case we don't actually have to make many at all, because we've got paralysis, FF, contact, and that's the kind that we're going to want. You're going to want a magic effect that is on contact. So if you just open that up and take a look, paralysis, FF, contact, and you want to make sure that under the delivery it says contact, so it's on contact of the person. We do have other options like aim, target actor, target location, but those can be a little too picky. You obviously won't want self. So I think aimed can tend to work, or target actor, but obviously it's a little more specific. Contact should work because it works the same as sort of enchantments on weaponry, because the arrow in effect is a sort of weapon. Now you've got the target conditions up here. I'm not going to go too much into magic effects, but you can have target sort of conditions to prevent it from knocking out dragons and stuff, which is obvious. So that's already there in this case. You want to make sure that that's there, and anything that's immune to paralysis won't get it. So it's probably a good idea that we keep those in. Now, just to make this process a little easier, even though we've already got that magic effect, I'm going to duplicate it and have one and name it as my own, because it's just going to make things a lot easier with the ID and knocking things together. So I'm going to put DF para effect, make it nice and simple, DF paralysis effect. So OK, no to the yes. So there we go, DF paralysis effect. Now we've got our magic effect, as we would do putting it onto a weapon, because we're going to follow that sort of same ruling. We're going to need to create an enchantment. So go into enchantments under magic, wipe out the paralysis. I think we're going to alternate click a new here, and then we're going to go DF para ENC for enchantment. So you don't really need to bother too much with the name, as that's usually something that comes up if you were going to be disenchanting it off something, but we won't actually have that option with an arrow. But I'm going to put it in there anyway. Type enchantment, don't put staff enchantment. Fire casting, that's a good question. I'll probably go with fire and forget. Delivery contact. Let's just see what other options we have there. That's interesting. Don't think that matters too much. We'll stick with fire and forget. And then effect, we obviously want to find our effect. so DF has helped find it a lot easier. So we've got a DF power, and obviously these selections will depend on the sort of effect. You want to sort of make sure really that the only thing there, if it's a fire arrow, then obviously be sure that there's a magnitude there so you can set how much, and the duration. In this case the duration does really apply, so we're going to say 3 seconds. That's probably fair enough, because you've got to remember that you'll probably be able to get another arrow out and do another 3, so you don't want this too powerful. Base enchantment and worn restrictions, you don't really need to mess with those in this scenario, and you don't even need to mess with the calculation of enchantment cost, because it's just going to be a fire off one thing off an arrow. So click OK. Now we've got our enchantment and our magic effect. This is where we dig into sort of the arrow type of thing. So we're going to go to special effects and explosion. Now with explosions you don't want to make a new one from scratch, it's just not going to work at all. The explosion is going to sort of this is going to determine how it reacts when it hits the target, and it's also going to determine the most important thing, which is the visual effects. So as you might imagine, we're going to alternate click preview, and you want to move your box to the side, and you want to go down until we see an effect that we'd like to see happen when we hit the target. Some of these won't have anything on them, so obviously they're useless to us. We want to go down, wait till we see something. You can also click on them to see the effect. Let's see if we can sort of narrow this down, see if any of these has it. There it is, paralysis effect. That's the one we're going to want. So when you've found what you want, duplicate it, edit it. Sometimes when you click edit on explosions it takes a little while to load, so be patient with it. DF para EXP. Name we don't really need to bother too much with here. Now you can I'll leave a link in the description for the wiki that explains pretty much all of these options, because I don't even know all of them myself. But the force behind it is sort of the impact it's going to have on the target. I usually leave that between 1 and 10, something like that. It's not too important, but when you put it up you might see a bit of a difference in the way that the arrow reacts. Damage is an interesting one. Now in this case we don't want to apply any damage. We just want that you've got 3 types of damage. This may confuse you a little. The first type of damage is the damage that the arrow itself, the base arrow, is going to do, just like any other arrow would do, that extra bit of damage. The second bit of damage is any damage that the explosion here is actually going to cause. So you can add extra damage coming from the explosion, which usually I keep as 0. I don't use the explosion damage. And the third type of damage is the damage that we do want to make an effect. And that's if you're making a fire arrow, for instance, you'd want fire damage. This damage wouldn't give it fire damage, it would just be random damage. So we'd want the fire damage to come from the magic effect itself. So you usually set that on the actual effect. Radius, this is where things get interesting. I'm not quite sure what the difference between these two are. I always get confused. But the easiest thing to do with these, one is actually the visual radius, and the other one is the radius that the effect is going to take place, or the explosion is going to reach out to. So I usually put I'll put both of these to around 150, I think. We may have to change it. This is really important. You can put this to stupid radiuses if you want. I wouldn't really recommend it, but it's entirely up to you. But when we've managed to determine which one of these radiuses is the actual explosion radius, so how far it reaches, you want to make sure it's at least 150. The reason is because I used to set it at around 75, and I noticed that I was unable to shoot targets anywhere on the body and have the effect take place. I'll be shooting a target in the head, which is where most people aim, and the actual paralysis or whatever the effect was wouldn't take place. This is because the radius begins at the very centre of the NPC's body and spreads outward. So if it's too low, it doesn't go up higher enough or outward enough to cover the head. So setting the radius like this will mean that the explosion will cover the entire body, no matter where it hits, and the effect will be able to take place. Now, the other thing which is unfortunate about the radius, I know I'm sort of yabbering on, but it's information that you're really going to want to know. The other thing about the radius is it can, if there's NPCs standing close enough to them, it can catch two people at once. And unfortunately, as far as I know, there's not a lot we can do about that. So you just got to sort of hope it only catches the one. But I suppose most people count it as a Brucey bonus anyway, if it catches two people. Vertical offset, we'll just leave that. I actually have no idea what that is. I don't even know if that was there before. You've got a few nice things that you can really do with this. I'm not going to add them all on. You've got chain, which is how chain lightning reacts, so you can imagine what a load of fun that can be. But I wouldn't really recommend bothering with chain stuff with paralysis, but you can mess with the options, see what they do. A lot of these do a lot of interesting things. You can even make it always knock down actors or NPCs only, or by formula. I'm not going to bother with that with my paralysis, because paralysis will do that itself. Light is really interesting. You can have a constant light around the arrow, and you just select whatever light, and you can go and create your own light in there. Enchantment we'll go to in a minute, because we need that. And you've got two sounds. Now, the sound I'm going to want, I'm only going to use one sound, and I recommend you usually do, is I'm going to want a sound for paralysis, if I can actually find one. Not sure there's going to be one. I'm not going to spend too much time. I'll leave it how it is, so it's going to sound a bit weird, so it's really the visual, but you can go down there, find yourself a sound that you like. So in my case, it would be a paralysis sound. Put it in, and make sure your arrow doesn't just look right but also sounds right. So the explosion part of this really does quite a lot, which is why I'm covering it a lot. Is mood, I recommend you leave that if it's in the explosion that you've seen. That can usually determine the visuals as well. Impact data set we'll leave. You can leave most of it. Sound level's pretty important. Paralysis, we might want this to be a silent paralysis arrow, so it hits them nice and silently and knocks them out without anybody else noticing. We'll keep it as silent. Place object, you can even have it so that when the arrow hits something appears. You can do some pretty crazy shit with this. Spawn projectile, so it can actually spawn an object again. So that's pretty much it. We're just going to keep it at that. So we've got our explosion. We'll click OK. No and yes. We need to go back in because I've forgotten something. Open it back up, sorry. And enchantment. This is where we put our enchantment in. So as you can see by now, we're just linking these together. So far we've got our magic effect linked to our enchantment, linked to our explosion. The next step is to create a projectile. I've actually got a paralysis projectile show up there. We don't want that. You're going to want to make a projectile of your own. You might want to, when you know what arrow you sort of want to put this on, so I'm just going to go with L. No, I'll go with silver. Silver? No, we'll go with, let's just go with the 9 arrow. It's going to be easier. So the damage on it doesn't confuse us. Find the actual projectile for the arrow. That's the best idea. Duplicate that, edit it, and literally then all you're doing is adding the enchantment to it. Or the explosion, in this case. So we'll leave it as arrow. No, we won't. We'll put DF para pro. Dark Fox paralysis projectile. And the name we're going to call it. This is the actual name that the arrow itself. Is it the name it'll have? It may be. Just keep this the same as the name of the arrow that you're going to want anyway. It's been a long time since I've made these actually, so I'm a bit rusty. Projectile type, you can actually change these, but again I wouldn't recommend it for arrows, but you can mess and see what happens. Keep that with arrow. Light again, you can put light on certain things. This is actually putting the I think it's the same as sort of the light and the explosion. There's a load of different ways of setting things to this. Muzzle flash is sort of like when you fire a gun, you would have muzzle flash, so a flash of light every time it's fired off. It essentially does the same for your arrow. So when your arrow fires, muzzle flash, you can add a light that flickers. We're not going to bother with that, but we could go with green if you wanted. Explosion, this is where excuse me, this is where we link our explosion to it. So you can see we've got our para explosion there. Trigger on impact or alternate trigger. Usually go with the trigger on impact, and you can actually sort of set timers or proximity. So proximity is good. You can even fire an arrow onto the ground and say anyone that walks within a certain proximity will trigger it off. So we want trigger on impact, so that when the arrow hits them it triggers. Otherwise you'd click alternate and you'd say I want this to only trigger after this long, or trigger when people are in this proximity, and so on. Really cool things we can do with this. That's pretty much it. There's a load of other options here. These all change sort of the way that the arrow reacts. One thing to note here, this is detection level of the arrow itself. So you've got sort of the detection level of the explosion, how silent that is, and because we've got that to silent, we'll set the arrow as silent so they don't hear the arrow or the explosion. Like I said, you can mess with it and see what you can do. So just make sure that you've got your explosion set to it. Click OK, no, yes, and we're finally down to the last step. Last step is obviously, as you may have guessed, going to items, ammo. We've already got iron. Find the arrow that you want, duplicate it, edit it. So we're making the arrow itself. So we're going to call this Arrow of Paralysis, and we're going to go with DF Arrow Para. And I'll just put ammo to make that a little more obvious. Short name, I don't think you really need a short name. Value is quite important. People will probably go, oh, it's a good magical arrow, give it a value of 100. Not a good idea. You put it at a vendor, every single arrow will end up being about double that price. So I always recommend 1 to 5 in value. That's reasonable enough for an arrow, as you do have to consider how much merchants will put on top of the actual value of the arrow. So we'll say this is a pretty special arrow. It's going to be worth 3. They'll probably sell them about 4 gold a pop. Damage of the arrow, you can change. You could have it so it doesn't do any damage, and the arrow literally just does paralysis, but it wouldn't make too much sense. So we're just going to keep like the damage from the arrow and add the paralysis on top. Playable, you want to make sure that's ticked. Bolt I wouldn't mess with, because that could be something to do with the Dawn Guard. Description is pretty important. This is where this will overwrite any description that the magic effect would possibly give it. You have to put this description, or it will just look like a normal arrow with the name and no description. So causes target to be paralysed for 3 seconds. Don't even know if that's spelt right, just get that done out of the way. Ignore all if it comes up with correction. For spelling, click OK, no, yes, and we have our Arrow of Paralysis. Now I'm just going to hop into Riverwood here, as I always do, if I even can. We're in interiors, what the hell are we doing there? This is where now you want to decide how to put your arrow into the game. Do you want vendors to sell it or whatnot? You put it wherever, or just put it on the side. I want to go into Riverwood. There's one little trick I'm also going to show you here. Oh, go away. We don't want errors. Nobody likes them. Right, I'm going to do this. Oh my god, this is weird. After you've been playing with the Far Cry editor, this is quite confusing because this is inverted. One thing is, people don't know how to put arrows down and have more than one arrow, because in the game you notice that there are sometimes more than one arrow on the floor. All you got to do, put an arrow in, double click on it, extra count, and you can put that as a count of say 25, click OK, and it will change it into a bunch of arrows. So I'm going to put them there. Okay, a couple of things I forgot to mention. The first thing, which is a biggie, make sure that when you're in your arrow section, when you've made your arrow, actually set the projectile as DF Para Pro, otherwise everything we've just done means nothing, as I just realised as I went into the game. I think I'll just add a few extra things as well. If your arrow doesn't seem to want to work, if your effect isn't working, if say the visual's there but the effect isn't taking place, go back to your magic effect, because this is where a lot of it sort of takes place. This is where a lot of the problems lie. If it doesn't work, you can try wiping out the target conditions first of all, and any keywords. You don't really need keywords, get rid of them. You don't need keywords all the time. Another thing to try if things still don't want to work is unticking the recover or FX persist box, or both. Just try that. Also be warned, when you do keep going in and out, in and out, in and out of the game, sometimes the game, even though you've saved the mod, sometimes the game is still remembering something that you were previously sort of testing, so it hasn't updated. So you might have to actually get through the hassle of maybe restarting your whole machine. So now I will go in game, and I'll show you our new paralysis arrow working. In terms of other arrows, you're just going to have to do a lot of trial and error. Not an easy thing creating enchanted arrows. So let's go in game. Okay, here we are in game, and as you can see I've got my arrow of paralysis. Doesn't look all that good. In terms of getting sort of nice enchantment effects on the item, it doesn't seem to work by the usual means of sort of setting a shader in the magic effect. I'm not sure why. So that's a bit of a bummer, but at least the arrow does what it says, which we're going to show on the poor old Sven. He's going to take an arrow to the face. So let's try this. And as you can see, like I said, if it's standing to anyone close, it can tend to affect them. The radius was a little large, so maybe you could knock down the radius of that. Sven's a bit pissed off now, so just pause it. That is how you make your enchanted arrows. Like I said, if you're having any trouble, then it's just really a lot of trial and error, and tweaking things and messing with magic effects. I'll leave links in the description for help with that kind of stuff. I want to really thank everyone for their support. It has been a while since I've done the tutorial. This is a nice long detailed one. Please don't get leaving comments saying like my arrow doesn't work, this and that, because quite frankly I can't help everyone with every single individual sort of arrow that they're trying to make. It's just going to really take a lot of trial and error, messing around and see what you can do, but that should really help. So please go check out my main website, my antisocial websites, all that. Do leave nice comments. Hopefully they will be nice. So leave comments, let me know what you think, and thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time.